Let's switch it over to running back. I've led the different positions. Why don't you hit me with your first running back on your fade list at this point?
So as a guy, you briefly mentioned his name at the beginning of the show. I believe you compared Chris Thompson to him, and that's Dalvin Cook. And for me, it's about the first 2 rounds. There's not a whole lot of ceiling upside to be chasing. Like, these guys are scoring basically about the same amount of points. You talk about Dalvin Cook. He's played in 28 out of 48 games so far. That's about 9 per season. And he's going above running backs like Austin Eckler, Derrick Henry, Joe Mixon. These guys have played 14 games every single season. And you look at last year, especially Derrick Henry. This is the one I do not believe in any league, even a PPR format, that Dalvin Cook should be going before Derrick Henry. And Derrick Henry last year with Ryan Tannehill, he averaged 21.1 points per game in a PPR format. Dalvin Cook last year, 20.9. Derrick Henry was a better running back for fantasy for you last year with Ryan Tannehill than Dalvin Cook was. And then you throw in the durability factor. Why are you chasing Dalvin Cook and taking on the risk of a player who's averaged 9 games per season and is playing 28 out of 48 games so far, so you can pass up Derrick Henry, who's basically just a behemoth of what I don't even know if can even be called a human being. Like, this guy is a monster. I'm not betting on Derrick Henry to get hurt, not after he's played 62 out of 64 games. And I'm not betting on him regressing significantly, especially when he should be just as good as last year rushing and could possibly even see increased receiving volume. If I'm at 5th overall, 6th overall, 7th overall, I'm fading Dalvin Cook probably to the end of the first round, maybe into round 2, just because I want stability. I don't want to have to take on a guy who I'm not comfortable with in round 1, a guy who I feel like I have to reach on his handcuff probably in round 7 or 8, and then spend 2 picks on one guy. I don't like it. If Dalvin Cook plays all 16 games this year, goes off, goes crazy, great. I lost a 1 to 2 point per game advantage by going with Derrick Henry. Big whoop. I can still win my league.
Right. No arguments there. And it's funny because Derrick Henry started the offseason. I remember seeing this and being shocked. Derrick Henry started the offseason as a second-round running back. Like, if you have your drafts in May and June, which that's rare, but some people do it, you could have had Derrick Henry in the second round. Now, average draft position, according to Fantasy Pros, I know you're looking at something I think might be using a different source. But
no, I'm using Fantasy
Oh,
Pros.
you are? Okay. So I have him at running back 4 at this point. So he's kind of vaulted up the charts, and I think he should because I think for all those reasons. I mean, he gets volume. I don't think the end of last season was a fluke. But speaking about Dalvin Cook, so I'm not a guy that wants to go skydiving, right? I don't want to jump I don't want to jump out of a plane, and I don't want to. Yeah, good for you, man.
Not in fantasy.
Yeah, not in fantasy, but you like skydiving. Great for you. I'm not built that way. I'm just a guy that wants to stay on the plane. I don't care if I'm with an instructor. I don't do it. What's that thing where you jump out of a plane and you have like a fly suit and you like jump off? It's like you base dive, your base jump, and then you fly. What's that version of skydiving? I can't remember what it's called.
The name of it.
Well, whatever it is.
It's like a wingsuit.
It's a wingsuit. So you got skydiving, which is, fairly safe, but I don't want to do it. Then you have whatever that thing is, and that's what Dalvin Cook is to me. Now here's the thing: when I put out the almanac, and I calibrate, the offense and Kubiak, I think Dalvin Cook in that system, if he can stay healthy, biggest if in the world. It's just going to be a home run. And the projections came back, and I think I actually had Dalvin Cook in terms of projections, and I'm talking about if these are avatars, not taking health into account. Dalvin Cook, I think, was projected to come back as the number 1 running back. But then you have risk, like you were saying before. And when do you take him? I would take Dalvin Cook. I would take the risk, but you were absolutely right. The risk is astronomical, and I can't argue about steering clear of that. I'm personally not fading him too much, but, man, it is wingsuit skydiving. It's dangerous. So
while we're talking about those first round running backs, there's just a couple of them that I'm tending to just kind of pass on. Mm-hmm. Dalvin Cook. Talk about Josh Jacobs. I really like Josh Jacobs. I wanted my Ravens to draft him so bad last year. I just can't get on board with that shoulder and then the questions about the receiving role. I want security. Give me Nick Chubb, who I'm not even that high on. I'd rather him than Josh Jacobs just because I feel like he'll stay healthy. Kenyon Drake, who it kills me to say this just because I was so high on him this year. with him being in a walking boot.
Yep.
It could be nothing. Miles Sanders too. It could be nothing, but man, it just gives me pause taking those guys in the first round. I think kind of the guys who are going up my board now: Derrick Henry, Mixon, CEH, Chubb, even Aaron Jones is kind of sliding up my board. Eckler specifically, just because I'd rather a guy who doesn't give me health concerns. So if I'm missing on those stable running backs in round 2, I think I'd rather just take a top tight end.
Yeah, no argument. And you mentioned Edwards-Helaire, CEH. So it's funny, after the draft came out, I put out my first version of the book, and I think I had Edwards-Helaire at that point overranked, which was around like 10 or 11 at running back, maybe, somewhere in that bottom of the first round kind of area. And I think he initially kind of debuted in the rankings around like 20 to 25, overall. I'm not talking about running backs, like overall. And eventually he slung shot past. So like readers will come in and like future versions of the draft. I haven't moved Edwards-Helaire since he's come out. And my thing is, like, when I watched,
even with the Damian Williams news,
even with that, I never moved him because I started watching college tape at that point. And I'm not saying I'm fading him because I kept him consistent, but the reason I'm not moving him up into my top 8, like he's kind of inching up in a lot of drafts, and in my dynasty league, I think he went like 4th overall in the year 1 draft. So like that's not to say like he was the top rookie taken, like he was actually the 4th overall running back selected. So like I get the value, I get Andy Reid. I remember Brian Westbrook very well for the Philadelphia Eagles. I'm sure that's the vision. But when I watch college tape and I see linebackers and defensive ends seriously like being able to run him down in an open field, this is the NFL, man. Like, you're going to have a defensive tackle. Like, think about this, because this will happen. He's going to break through. He's going to have an open field, and a defensive tackle is going to chase him down 10 yards down the field. It's just not what we're used to seeing. He has great hands. He can pick up the blitz. He's going to have value. But I'm not moving him up into my top 8 when I don't know what's happening there. On top of that, I'm starting to see, because of course we can't watch the games, and that's the big thing. We need to watch preseason games to vet all this stuff, right? I look at the news and I hear like Mahomes or somebody say like, oh yeah, when he's in there, he's doing well. Well, why isn't he in there all the time? Like, that's a weird, and I know I could be reading a lot into that, but when I see that, I'm just like, what are they going to do? Are they going to throw DeAndre Washington in here in a weird kind of split? Is Darrell Williams, who we talked about, is he going to be getting red zone carries? It's just a little bit too much risk for me. I know the upside. I'm not arguing with the upside, but I just feel like the signs are pointing towards Edwards-Helaire needs an offseason to go to speed camp and knock a 10th or 2 off of his 40 time before I feel comfortable with it. Like, if I saw him in action, it's one thing, but not seeing him in action, I just feel he's a little risky to take if at like the number 8 pick. I'd wait for him on the swing back personally.
Let me tell you why I'm on the other side of that, all right? Because Clyde Edwards-Helaire, I don't think he needs to have substantial rushing volume. He doesn't need breakaway runs to be a top fantasy back. Like, where this guy gets value, it's going to be catching the ball, getting 50-plus receptions, which I think he can easily do.
I agree.
And it's going to be scoring touchdowns, right? I feel like Edwards-Helaire, he's going to have to go out of his way to underperform this year. Like, he's going to have to really do something to muck this up, because if you're in the starting running back in a Patrick Mahomes offense who can catch the ball, he's going to catch 50 receptions. He's going to score 10-plus touchdowns almost just by default by being on the field. So you bring up the speed, the breakaway speed. Kareem Hunt ran a 4.62. He seemed to do just fine in this offense. I don't think it's something that I'm going to write him off for. Do I think it does limit his rushing potential? Yes, but I think those touchdowns are going to be really all that he needs to happen to reach that upper RB1 territory.
So let me talk a little bit about speed, because that's a great point that you brought up, 4.62, and I think Jerry Rice famously ran a 4.6. You see him catch the ball and run away from people over the years, and he's the GOAT at the wide receiver position. When I see speed, I'm not worried about 40 time. I'm not telling you this, David. I'm telling the people that are listening in. I'm not worried about 40 time. If I see a guy run a 5 flat 40, I don't care about that. I want to know what they run in pads. And so, like, the draft stuff, the slow 40, I've seen plenty of running backs have a slow 40. I personally write that off. I want to see what you look like on film. And so when I say, like, when I'm watching college tape, when he's in pads and running, does he look slow? Yeah, he looks slow. Whereas a Kareem Hunt, when you put him in pads, he doesn't look slow to me. And so that's what gives me pause. It's not the time itself. It's are you running? Does it look like you're running in on a sandy beach when everybody's on a track surface when you have pads on? And when I see that gives me enough of a red flag to not draft him. Like I said, in my top 8, I'm not fading him. I'm not removing him from my draft board. But we're talking about very nuanced picks up there and evading risk. And I just said I'm already in the wingsuit with with Dalvin Cook. Edwards-Helaire, I would have Josh Jacobs a little bit ahead of Edwards-Helaire. And we're talking about one spot of average draft position.
Let me talk about that real quick, too, because you talk about the 40 speed and the film. One thing that popped out to me on film, you're right, he doesn't look fast, but he is quick. This guy is quick, and you can see that on film. Turn on the game against Alabama. Look at those spin moves. Look at those spin moves, man. Like, this guy is quick. He can, you know what they say? He can make a guy miss in a phone booth, and he really can. And I think when you apply that to the passing game, running routes, he can. This guy can spin.
Look at those spin moves.
Nailing that circle button, just circle, like all over Alabama. He's quick as a cat. All right.
Yeah.
So put a little respect on Edwards-Helaire.
Hey, man, like I said, I had him at 10. I haven't moved him from that. It might even be, depending on format, it might be a little bit different. And I'll give him a little bit of respect, since just to let you know I'm not all negative about what I'm really impressed by, because he's not a big guy in terms of stature. What I'm really impressed by is how tough he runs in the middle of the pile. Like, you talk about Andy Reid, you talk about Mahomes, this is a passing offense, you talk about the receptions. And I'm not going to give it to him yet, but I will say this. I would rather have, if I had to pick between DeAndre Washington and CEH on a 4th and goal from the 1 situation, run the ball up the middle, CEH going away. Like, this dude will run through the pile. He can get you a yard, and that's a big deal. Now,
you talk about the low center of gravity, too. One comparison that I loved, Elvin Ryan made this on Twitter, Maurice Jones-Drew.
Yeah, sure.
Small, but he is thick, man. Yeah. Like, you do not want to take that guy on when he's got his shoulder lowered.
Yep.
Not one bit.
Yep. So yeah, I mean, I'm not negative. There are just a couple of guys, like maybe 1 or 2, that I would take above him. I think 4 is a little bit too high. 8 for me is still maybe 2 picks too high. But if I had ended up with him in my dynasty league, I wouldn't be crying about it. I really probably. Yeah, we talked about Fournette. Obviously, he's gone, so we probably don't even need to talk about that anymore. How about Todd Gurley is the next name on my list at running back?
He's on mine, too.
Okay, so when he signed in Atlanta, I read an ESPN article. I don't know who wrote it. They were projecting 21 touchdowns for him. 20, like, legit. Like, I had to double-check. 21 touchdowns. This is total. I think it was, like, 15 rushing and 6 receiving or something like that. It was that kind of breakdown, like Aaron Jones-type numbers from last year. And I'm just like, what are you thinking, guys? I mean, this is an offense that historically, I mean, you could date back to the first run of the offense and the coordinators there. Forgive me, I can't remember his freaking name. Dirk Cutter, thank you. So Dirk Cutter, his first stint with Atlanta, then his time in Tampa Bay, he just doesn't use running backs, man. He just doesn't. And Todd Gurley's coming from a running back-centric system that tries to run the ball inside the 5-yard line to a wide receiver in passing situation. Hayden Hurst is going to outscore Todd Gurley this year. I have no problem throwing that projection down, as well as Julio Jones, as well as Calvin Ridley, in my opinion. He's an afterthought in this offense. He can get you a tough yard, and I think that's going to be his role in this offense. Yeah, he's going to be running back 1 there. But, hey, Devontae Freeman wasn't anything special in this offense either. I mean, you got to look at the system. I'm fading him for a couple of rounds. I mean, I'm talking about, like, I have him, like, 30 picks, like, later in terms of my overall rankings. What do you think?
I think you make a ton of great points, and I'm fading Todd Gurley as well, especially in round 3. What it reminds me of is the Steven Jackson signing.
Yes. Yep.
Probably 5-6 years ago
in Atlanta with Dirk Cutter,
and not just in Atlanta, coming from the Rams.
Oh, yeah, there you go.
There are parallels all over the place with this, right? And I looked into some of the ADP. Steven Jackson, he went at 211 in my home redraft league, a 12-team league. So he was
Wow.
going in basically late second round, early third round, kind of about where Todd Gurley's going. So when Steven Jackson went to the Rams, he was coming off a year in which he rushed for 258 carries, 1,045 yards, and 4 touchdowns, and caught 38 receptions for 321 yards. That's a very similar split to what Todd Gurley is coming off, right? And the hope was, with little competition in the Atlanta backfield, there's no one behind Jackson on that depth chart, that he would be able to recreate that 3-down production we'd seen in previous years, where he had lines like 43 receptions, 320 yards, where maybe the year he had 90 for 806, 3 touchdowns, or the year he had 51 for 322. We just thought because no running backs, he's going to get those third down targets.
Yeah.
And we overlooked the fact that he was trending down, the fact that he had recent injuries, just like Todd Gurley, the fact that the team had wide receivers and tight ends. Then it was Roddy White, a young Julio, and Tony Gonzalez. Now it's an old Julio, Calvin Ridley, and a young Hayden Hurst. So they have, again, 2 wide receivers and a tight end to steal those targets. And then you look at the fact, what did Jackson end up doing? He ended up playing 12 games, and we overlooked the fact that he had a bunch of mileage, 1,265 carries on his tires. Gurley's got 5 straight years of 223-plus carries. Jackson broke down. There's a chance Gurley could break down. And you talk about even in the 12 games that Steven Jackson played, he caught, let me see what it is, like 33 reception for 191 yards in 12 games. That's not a whole lot of value in the receiving game. So I think the same concerns are there with Todd Gurley. He could break down. They don't rush the ball a lot. They don't pass the ball to the running back a lot historically. And at a third-round ADP, I'd rather just pass on Gurley, take one of those top tight ends, Mark Andrews, Zach Ertz, and just take a guy like Raheem Mostert 3 rounds later, who is, again, same kind of situation. You're hoping for 1,000 yards and double-digit touchdowns, not a huge receiving role. I'd rather Mostert in round 5 with a top tight end in round 3 than Gurley in round 3 and picking from Tyler Higbee in round 5 and 6.
Yeah, right.
I mean, it's just an easy decision for me to fade, and I have it go through basically that whole area. I'm fading Todd Gurley. I'm fading Chris Carson. I'm fading David Johnson in that round 3-4 territory, just because that risk factor. Like it doesn't make sense passing on the tight ends there.
Yeah, I agree. And in basically all of my mock drafts and all my draft preparation, I can tell you rounds 7, 8, and 9, I'm pretty much going Mostert in round 7, Marvin Jones in round 8, Jordan Howard in round 9. And I think all 3 of those are going to be flex-worthy, start-worthy players when all is said and done. So I know I can get value later. So taking a risk on Gurley, like you said, you can go with a tight end, or you can kind of go on that. You know, Mahomes and Jackson will probably be gone by then, based on average draft position these days and mock drafts. But you can get on that swing, whether it's Dak Prescott or Russell Wilson or Kyler Murray, whoever you like, Deshaun Watson. You can get those guys and know that you're going to be able to get 2 running backs and a wide receiver that will make your roster. More often than not, in my opinion, later. So yeah, I'm with you, man. Gurley's a fade. I'm looking down the list. I'm never super high on David Montgomery, but where he's being drafted, I don't have a super problem with that. Oh,
he just had the injury as well too, David Montgomery.
Oh, I missed on that. What happened to him?
He had what might be severe. I believe they gave him a 4-week timeline, so he's probably not going to be.
What is that, like an MCL? Is it a knee? Or is
it was his groin. It was a groin strain. He slipped on a wet practice field, and now his week 1 status is in doubt.
Dude, groin injuries are.
I know, and he was already tough. He was tough to buy into as well to begin with. So yeah. I think you got to put David Montgomery on the fade list at this point.
I'll give you another one who's kind of catching some steam. I've seen the offseason hype. I've seen what he's done in the weight room. Ronald Jones, for me, is a hard pass. And in years past, I think we've had this discussion before. Like Chris Carson, I know there are some question marks this year, but the Chris Carson versus Rashad Penny debate in 2 years, the last 2 seasons prior to this, I was never high on Penny, and I got laughed out of draft rooms when I would draft Chris Carson over Penny, even as recent as last year. I think the same is true with Ronald Jones this year, in that here's my philosophy. If you're in the same offensive system, And yeah, I know the Brady factor and all that, but you're in the same offense in Tampa Bay. Bruce Arians, you get drafted in the second round. You have every opportunity to get a starting job and to run with that job. You know Bruce Arians, he wants that David Johnson type. Let me just play you 3 downs and kind of get you a ton of targets and rushes and all that. That's what they wanted Ronald Jones to be. You didn't get it his rookie year. You didn't get it his second year. Even when he was named the starting running back, he was still splitting snaps with Peyton Barber. Peyton Barber, okay? He couldn't leave Peyton Barber in the dust. I just don't think he's going to take the reins and run with it. I know he's got his hat on. I know he's put on weight. You get Brady in there. Maybe he'll get more red zone opportunities because he won't throw so many interceptions. I understand the arguments. I don't think it's a big risk to take him where he's being drafted at this point, but I would be a buyer on Vaughn, the rookie there, before I'd be a buyer on Ronald Jones, just based on what I've seen in the past. I'm not convinced Ronald Jones is ever going to be a starting running back.
That's fair. I'm out on the entire Tampa Bay backfield. For
Me
the
too.
Most part.
Me
I
too.
don't mind.
Yeah.
I don't mind Ronald Jones at RB30 according to Fantasy Pros ADP, but I think, like you mentioned recently, you're seeing him go a lot higher than RB30. I've seen this guy go in the 5th round. I had a friend take him in the late 4th round.
Oh my goodness.
I'm looking at his draft. I'm trying to. It doesn't show the rounds. I'm like, okay, so you went this guy in the 3rd. Who was your 4th? Was it?
Yeah, right.
Was it Amari Cooper? No, I took Cooper in the 5th. I went Rojo in the 4th. My friends, that is not a good idea, all right? Because in the 4th round, you need a guy who's going to catch passes. And Ronald Jones, we don't know that at this point. The news out of camp, all I've heard, Ronald Jones dropping passes. And you mentioned Keyshawn Vaughn. I'm not buying into Keyshawn Vaughn at all. I don't think he's anything special athletically.
He's not. He hasn't.
He didn't have good testing numbers.
I was talking about CEH and watching his college film. Keyshawn Vaughn is a guy that I was hoping to see some more explosion from and be impressed by on film. He didn't really jump out to me either. I'm a seller too, because I think what will end up happening is they're just going to be a 3-headed running back committee.
And Rojo will have his good weeks. He will have his good weeks, but he had his good weeks last year. How often was he on your bench for those good weeks?
Yeah.
It was a guessing game. Like, he's going to have to improve significantly in the receiving area for it to go beyond a guessing game. Like, it's just tough to rely on him.
His ADP, you're talking about recent ADP, he is going a lot higher than this, but he's jumped ahead of Jordan Howard in ADP. In terms of Fantasy Pros, I just talked about Jordan Howard. You look at Jordan Howard, you feel like must be like 29 or 31 or something like that. He's 25, league age 25. So it's not like Jordan Howard has some juice. He had like his best year is probably his rookie year, but he's going to have value in this offense. I know they have Breed. I think Breed will have some surprising value as a PPR kind of option there as well. But they're just people I like a lot more than Jones, man, especially where he's being drafted now. And then I don't really have anybody else on my running back list that I'm super fading. Do you, anybody left on your list that we haven't talked about?
I got a couple left. This is the end of my list is the running back. So I talked about Chris Carson, right? I mentioned him. It's just read the tea leaves. Team drafted DJ Dallas round 4. He went out, signed Carlos Hyde. It could be just about Rashad Penny. I doubt it. You don't get 2 running backs in because you're worried about your backup running back, all right? They're worried about Carson's health. And justifiably so. I've mentioned this probably about 20 times on the podcast so far. He hasn't played a full year since his senior year of high school. How many times do I got to say that? Stop drafting guys who haven't played full year since their senior year of high school. It's way too much risk in the 4th round to be passing up other legitimate options for guys who could and likely will burn you. Then you talk about... Okay.
Let me jump in on Carson real quick. So DJ Dallas, I think he's basically going to take over for Rashad Penny. I think that's it. I think he'll be on the field. The Carlos Hyde thing to me is the more, I would say, concerning storyline this offseason for Chris Carson. And I'm sure I wrote this in the book, but my big thing with Carson, I like his explosion, his ability to move the pile. And I think Seattle does too. I think the coaching staff likes him, but I think what drives them freaking crazy is, they'll be running out the clock. They'll be up 6 points, and there's going to be a minute left in the game, and it's going to be a 2nd and 1, and Carson will get 5 yards and then spin out and then fumble. And he doesn't just fumble. He fumbles in the most critical moments, and that will make you lose a job at the running back position faster than anything else, in my opinion. If you fumble, especially in key situations, even if you get the ball back, even if your offensive lineman jumps on that, you're just begging to give snaps away to somebody else. In New England, if you fumble, you might not get another snap for like 6 weeks. You have to wait for everybody else who just left you on the depth chart to fumble again before you get snaps. And Seattle is, if Carson gets in there, I think he's going to start the season as a starter. I do. But if he fumbles in week 1, week 2, Carlos Hyde comes in there, holds onto the ball, gives him some juice. I mean, that could be it for him. It really could.
Yeah. And I got one more running back in that range and then 2 more after. I got David Johnson, who I mentioned. He's soon to be 29 years old.
Yep.
He's averaged 3.7 yards per carry or less in 3 straight years, 1.8 yards after contact or less in 3 straight years. So he's been not a good runner, right? And then you look at the fit in Houston. Everybody's projecting this workhorse role, and that's the selling point in round 4. But even if he gets this heavy rushing volume that Carlos Hyde got last year, I believe was around 250 carries, he's not been efficient with his carries at all in any of the last 3 seasons. So he's not going to provide a ton of – Carlos Hyde didn't provide a ton of value with his legs last year. He was borderline rosterable despite having 250 carries. And then we're just assuming, because of David Johnson's pass, he's going to come in and push Duke Johnson right out of the way. Duke Johnson exists.
Right.
We don't know what kind of target total David Johnson's going to get. And there's a strong possibility, and this is not my words, this is Ron Stewart, who you might want to follow on Twitter. He's a good follow. He put up a thread on David Johnson. David Johnson is in the wrong role. He's in the Carlos Hyde role. He should be in the Duke Johnson role. They don't have the proper fit here. And it looks very much so like they're going to be asking David Johnson to do the things he's not good at. And it looks very much like it's quite possible that the things he is somewhat good at he's going to have to split with Duke Johnson. So at a round 4 asking price, 29 years old, with the durability issues, inefficiency, a second back on the roster who could steal targets, easy pass for me. Easy pass. I'm not having David Johnson in a single one of my leagues.
I have others in the area above David Johnson. I'm not as strong as a fade as you are. I actually ended up with him in my dynasty draft because he dropped far. I no arguments with what you said about Hyde and Duke Johnson. The big question is whether or not he's going to be able to out-target Duke Johnson. If he can be a 3-down back, which is as projected right now, I do think that he'll have value at where he's being picked, and that's kind of what I'm banking on. But there is risk there, and the reality is even in his big years in Arizona, his yards per carry was not impressive. It was all volume-based in that system, right? So, will he get touchdowns? I think he will. The big thing for me is that, DeAndre Hopkins vacating 150 whatever targets that he had last year. Some of those will go to running back. Is it going to be Duke Johnson? I think that's a valid concern. At this point, where he's being drafted, and you can get him, 5th, 6th round at this point, I think he's worth the flyer there, depending on kind of what you already have on the bench.
Let me just ask you this one more thing with David Johnson,
Sure.
Because the main selling point, right, is that they traded for him and that they traded DeAndre Hopkins for him, so they are going to feel like they need to justify that trade by using him. How long is that going to last? Do we know today, in today's world, that David Johnson's a better running back than Duke Johnson? Do we know that? Do we know he's a better receiving running back than Duke Johnson? I don't know that we know that. And I don't know if they're going to go the whole season just trying to justify a trade playing the worst player in receiving, even in just receiving situations, even if he's a better runner than Duke. I don't know that they're going to continue to just force feed him the ball and look away from Duke just to try and justify that.
And another note on that too is people say, the trade and all that stuff. Houston really traded for the draft pick, I think, more so than they traded for Duke Johnson. Now, did they get enough value back for DeAndre Hopkins? Hell no. I think that was an awful trade. I tweeted as much and talked about it as much. But Duke Johnson, I'm not saying he's an afterthought because I do think that there's value there. But to your point, I don't think that they'll feel the pressure to play Duke Johnson because they traded DeAndre Hopkins for Duke Johnson. I don't see that. I think that
David Johnson.
Did I say Duke? Yeah, David.
Yeah.
Sorry. The wrong
It's an
D.
easy
Johnson.
slip.
Oh, yeah. So what are they going to do on the jersey? Is one going to be D.A. Johnson and the other one's going to be D.U. Johnson?
It better.
D.U. Johnson. Anyway. Yeah, that jersey situation is going to be messed up. Yeah, so I don't know. We'll see. But who are your other
So I
running backs
got
there?
two more to
Yep.
kind of finish up real quick. And this one hurts. It really, 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 really hurts to say Mark Ingram. Guys, he's being
Oh,
way, way, way overvalued
there you
this
go.
year.
There's the name there in the book
Ugh,
there. Mark
guys,
Ingram.
you're drafting him way too high. He had 202 carries and 26 receptions last year in 15 games. Only 202 carries and 26 receptions. He was buoyed by 15 touchdowns. He had 5 receiving touchdowns on 26 receptions, guys. That's not going to happen again. You throw in J.K. Dobbins, who they invested in heavily in the draft, in improving Gus Edwards, a healthy Hollywood, Devin Duvernay. Mark Ingram's going to be lucky to hit 20 receptions this year. He's going to be lucky to hit 8 touchdowns. The yardage ceiling is not high. I mean, he's going to be a touchdown-dependent flex who's not going to give you much if he's not in the end zone. And right now you're paying a 5th or 6th round price for that. Like,
Yeah.
that's just – it's not worth it. Unless J.K. Dobbins gets hurt, you're going to get burned spending a pick in that range on Mark Ingram this year.
Yeah, mark my words. J.K. Dobbins will be the absolute monster in that backfield by week 8, if not before that. If he's not all ready to start the season, I agree with you. Ingram is a risk. Now, I think he'll have some value, but not where he's being drafted. Let me throw another one quickly at you because I just remembered. I've seen some press saying Marlon Mack, like Jonathan Taylor in Indianapolis is
The words out my mouth.
yeah.
Words
I
out
mean,
my mouth.
yeah. It was that your other one, Jonathan Taylor.
No.
What was yours?
Oh God, we're on the other side.
We're on the
All
opposite
right.
side. So let me just say
Marlon
this.
Mack.
Marlon Mack. I've seen him go late. Here's the thing: like Jonathan Taylor, the press, like what's his face, Frank Reich's saying that like Taylor's having trouble overtaking Mack. I don't know for where Taylor's because Taylor's going at the bottom of the second. In my league, I think he went at the top of the second round. If you're in a dynasty league, I don't have beef with that, but you can find. Look, I mean, Frank Reich historically has gone to that 3 running back thing when he's had to. Marlon Mack, I'm not saying like I like him. I'm saying it's more like Tampa where I'm kind of avoiding the backfield until I see. I like Jonathan Taylor, dude. I think he's got a lot of talent. What I'm concerned with is I don't know that he's going to overtake in that job as fast as J.K. Dobbins is going to overtake things in Baltimore. I think those 2 running backs, I would swap them in my league. I would move Jonathan Taylor down a little bit, move J.K. Dobbins up. Again, I know I'm disagreed with there, but Marlon Mack, to hear press that he could start the season as a starter, I don't know, man. That it's too murky for me. And I don't think Nyheim Hines is I think he's going to have some value as a pass receiving running back as well. I'm staying away until I have more information. And Taylor's being, for me, drafted too early. I think that's too much risk at that pick where he's going.
See, I won't disagree with anything you said with Taylor because those concerns are 100% legit. And especially in a PPR format, I think the risk is a lot more palatable in a half PPR where you're kind of just more relying on Taylor to be that elite rusher and to just be a top NFL rusher his first year. But Marlon Mack on the other side, man, like you talk about Nyheim Hines, he's going to be that third down guy. And Marlon Mack, even if he's splitting carries with Jonathan Taylor, like we're talking about what? This team's going to run the ball at most 400 times. You give JT 15 carries a game. You can read any way you want about the coach speak because I've heard just as much things about Jonathan Taylor running over safeties as I have about Marlon Mack playing well. So you can read it in either way. I think at the end of the day, Marlon Mack is severely outclassed by Jonathan Taylor. If he can get a 60-40 split on the carries this year, I'd say Marlon Mack would be lucky. And to give him 40% of the carries at 400 carries, I mean, that's, 160 carry ceiling? And that's if he hits the ceiling. He's much more likely to land in that 125 to 140 carry range. And when you talk about his receptions, man, his receptions have been decreasing, I think, 3 years straight.
Yep.
Let me talk about some of his games last year. In the past 2 years, he's been completely touchdown dependent as a fantasy option. He has, in 2018, he played 12 games. 9 of them, he scored 10-plus fantasy points. But only 2 of those 9 times was it without a touchdown. He needed a touchdown the 7 other times to get to 10-plus fantasy points. Talk about last year. He played in 14 games. He had 7 of those games with 10-plus fantasy points. That's about half his games, exactly half his games, with double-digit points. He reached double-digit points in those 7 games 1 time without a touchdown. 1 time without a touchdown. That's 3 out of 16 games in the past 2 years with 10-plus fantasy points without a touchdown. 3 out of 16 games he is able to do it without a touchdown. He had 8 touchdowns last year. You talk about Jonathan Taylor. That total's probably getting split in half, right?
Mm-hmm.
You talk about he needs a touchdown to score double-digit fantasy points.
Yeah.
That's 4 games on the year where he's going to get you double-digit fantasy points if we assume he needs the touchdown to get there. 4 games. Do you know where any of those 4 games are going to be coming?
Yeah,
he's in handcuff territory to me right now.
Yep.
He's not anything more than a guy who you stash on the bench and hope the starter gets hurt. Because Nyheim Hines, he's going to have that receiving role. Marlon Mack almost certainly is not going to be that third down back, and I just don't see the yardage volume. I don't see the touchdown upside to be drafting this guy anywhere before one of your last few picks.
Yeah, I agree with that. And in terms of Indianapolis, I think the safest running back to take in terms of average draft position is Nyheim Hines, because in a lot of leagues you're going to be able to get him for free. Just put him on your watch list at this point and make sure that he gets some targets in week 1. Pick him up. You know what? I just looked at the clock, David.
Yeah,
we're talking for an hour and 17. Yeah, that should have been.
We love our running backs.
Yeah, I know. It's
got into it a little
we
bit.
should have split that into 2 episodes. But hey, next week we're talking. We're talking season next season, which is fantastic. Or next week, I mean. So we'll get on that. We'll end the podcast there. We probably went about a half hour too long, but so it goes, man. We're passionate about our fantasy football. That's the way it is on the show. Everybody, please like, subscribe. Thanks for hanging with us if you've hung with us for this long, because it's a long time. Like, subscribe, comment. We would appreciate that. We'll catch you next week, and we'll be talking projections, who to start, surprising starts, all that stuff. Maybe some daily fantasy sneaky plays, all that kind of stuff next week. So make sure you tune in. Catch you next time.